Could it be? But me, your man, Louie T. Welcome to this LouieTeeNetwork exclusive limited series, The Reign of Terror, chronicling the 23 years of pure hell Daniel Snyder has put this fan base through. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. We now find ourselves in chapter 16, which lands us in 2014. Another changing of the guard in Washington, something that as Washington Redskins fans, we were all too familiar with. New staff, changes, running rampant. And so we were hitting the reset button again after the disastrous 2013 season with Mike Shanahan. The biggest priority going into 2014 and in this coaching search for Washington was saving Robert Griffin III. And as a Grizzlies fan, I can kind of attest to that. If you look at what the Grizzlies have done this offseason, signing Derrick Rose, trading for Marcus Smart, all of those moves were done with salvaging Ja Morant in mind. Finding a way to find veteran players who may have an influence on Ja that gets him to see the bigger picture, because they understand in Memphis that if there's no Ja Morant, if for some reason Ja doesn't work out in Memphis or in the NBA, he can't get his act together and gets suspended indefinitely by the league, and he's not a Memphis Grizzly, they go back to being NBA obscurity, right? You're no longer a powerhouse. You're no longer a title contender. Without Ja Morant, you cease to exist on the NBA landscape. And so they know that their top priority is making sure that they surround Ja Morant with guys that can get to him mentally and help him focus on the thing that matters the most. Start making better life choices and decisions. I felt like 2014 was very similar in the respect of trying to salvage Robert Griffin III. It felt like Operation Salvage Griffin in 2014. And so they were out for an offensive mind. I don't think they picked the right guy necessarily, because not that Jay Gruden wasn't qualified. He was the offensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals. Not that he didn't know the quarterback position. He was a quarterback himself. He saw the game from a quarterback's lens. He was really good and smart and very shrewd as an offensive mind. He could scheme guys open. I didn't love his run game, but at the end of the day, Jay knew how to coach up the quarterback position. The problem was that Jay's offense didn't fit Robert Griffin III's skill set. And Robert wanted to be a pocket passer. He wasn't ready. Shanahan had already said he wasn't ready, and that he needed to just allow the process to work itself out, do the things they were asking him to do, and he would grow into being a pocket passer. Similar to some of the guys we saw like Michael Vick and Randall Cunningham, who got better as pocket passers as their careers prolonged. That was going to happen. Same thing I think is going to ultimately happen with Lamar Jackson. As he continues to play the quarterback position, he's going to get even better at, throwing the football from the pocket. People don't think he can do it. A lot of people used to say the same thing about Randall Cunningham, and then look at what he was by the time he got to the end of his career. Look at what Vic was by the time he got to the end of his career. As you get, longer in the tooth, and, some of that athleticism leaves you a little bit, you're forced to have to be able to throw from the pocket. And I think Griffin would have eventually gotten there, but if he would have been able to stay healthy, but that's another discussion for another day. I don't think he was ready for a Jay Gruden type of offense. I thought it was too much going on. It was too complex. Robert needed to see receivers open. He was still in that college frame of mind. And Jay came in, and of course he said all the right things that you're supposed to say when, you're asked about, hey, can you salvage Robert Griffin III? Because he's our guy. Can you come in here and get the most out of him? And everybody looked at his resume and said, hey, he did it with Andy Dalton. Why can't he do it with Robert Griffin III? Because they're two different quarterbacks. But, Jay Gruden wanted the opportunity, and he said, look, this guy is super talented. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work with him. That didn't last very long. It didn't take him very long to get in here and realize this Griffin kid just doesn't have it. But he couldn't just bench him, right? You had to go with what the owner wanted to do, or you'd be fired here shortly if that were the case. So 2014, it felt like it had disaster written all over it. But that's not how we felt in the moment. Okay, let's see what this Gruden guy's got. I remember watching Hard Knocks with him as the offensive coordinator of the Cincinnati Bengals and watching how much of a hard ass he was on those players. And I loved it. And I was like, okay, this might be exactly what we need here in Washington. And so I'm looking forward to seeing this thing kind of transpire. And so, you know, you look at the draft, we didn't have a first round pick due to the Griffin trade. So again, another reason why this had to work, we spent a lot of resources, you know, going after him. You know, we're chasing that 2012 ghost. We want that back. Can you bring that back to us, Jay Gruden? Can you get that out of Robert? And the answer was a resounding no. But at the time, we were like, let's see. So they go into the draft and no first round pick. They draft Trent Murphy in the second round. They draft Morgan Moses. They draft Bashaud Breeland. They draft Spencer Long. They draft Ryan Grant. That was the crux of that draft. And those players would produce here for a while. You know, I need you to understand those first 2 years of Bashaud Breeland, that rookie season, and then that year after in 15, he was amazing. Remember how we thought of him. He was amazing. And he was going to be our number one corner. And then Josh Norman ended up shaking free. Similar to what happened in 2014. We had no intentions of signing Deshaun Jackson. He wasn't available, right? We had no intentions of going after a receiver, is what I'm alluding to. And then the Eagles just let go of Deshaun Jackson randomly in like April or May, and he's available, and we pounce on him. You know, Bruce Allen didn't do a lot of things right, but that was one of the best moves Bruce Allen made, was going out and getting Deshaun Jackson after the Eagles foolishly let him go. And he was out for revenge. So he was looking for an NFC East team to give him a shot to get back at the Eagles. That's all he really wanted. And we gave him that opportunity. He was phenomenal in 14. He was phenomenal in 15. He was phenomenal in 16. Dealt with some injuries in 14, his first year here. But 15 and 16, 2,000-yard seasons in a row. Deshaun Jackson was fantastic for us. And he might have had 1,000 yards in 14 and 15, and then he might have missed it in 16, dealt with some injuries in 16. Whatever the case may be, he was fantastic here. That little 3-year run we got with Deshaun Jackson in Washington was phenomenal. I thoroughly enjoyed it. When he was on the field, he was dangerous and a big play waiting to happen. So that was another acquisition in 2014, another toy for Robert Griffin III to play with and have at his disposal. And so, you know, I was optimistic. The thing that I was holding on to tight, like a security blanket, like, you know, was that Vikings game in 2013. There wasn't much that gave you confidence and hope that Robert still had it. That Vikings game, specifically the first half of that Vikings game, is what gave me hope. Like, hey, it's in there somewhere. We just got to get somebody to pull it out of him. It's in there. So now fully healthy, you know, that can't lean on the crutch of he's not healthy, fully healthy. All right. This is what you wanted. You wanted the Shanahans gone. They're gone. Jay Gruden's in. Fresh set of eyes. Let's see what we got. It did not take long to realize this is not going to work. Week 1, we go to Houston and the Texans are not good. All right. And we just don't play well. Robert doesn't play well. You know, the team overall, we get a punt block, scoop and score. Like, we just didn't play well. It was a total team loss. But Robert is the story. It's Operation Salvage Griffin. Like, he didn't play well. So you go to week 2, and Jacksonville's coming to town. They had just drafted Blake Bortles, and they're starting Chad Henne. They don't want to play Bortles yet. And I'm like, thank God, you know, Henne stinks. Blame it on the Henne. You always blame it on the Henne, right? And we go in there and we throttle Jacksonville. But that's not the story. The story is Robert Griffin III gets hurt in this game. Kirk Cousins comes in. This has got to be, you know, mid to late first quarter that Griffin gets injured. You know, non-contact. He's rolling to the sidelines. There was a little bit of contact. I think he got hit and he planted on his ankle wrong and he dislocated it. I think that's what happened. But Kirk comes in and he's flawless. And we just destroy Jacksonville, like 41-13 or something like that. Yeah, we just obliterate them. It was fun. It's one of those fun games. We don't get it very often here in Washington. So you put a 40 burger on somebody and you got those juices dripping down your forearm from that 40 burger. It's really fun because we don't get to do that very often. So that was a lot of fun. And then you go the next week and Kirk plays outstanding football on the road. And I remember this being one of those performances that I said, hey, man, it's Kirk Cousins, dude, man. I remember being like on the fence about him in 2013 because he got an opportunity late in the season, you know, ups and downs of that season. You can't ever forget what he did in his rookie campaign, coming in the Atlanta game, not so good. But then the Cleveland game and the Baltimore game, 2 thumbs up. So you're thinking to yourself, all right, you know, let's see what Kirk has. He goes in there and he strokes it against Philadelphia. And that was my up until that point. That was my favorite Kirk Cousins game. I'm like, if he can play like that, he's the best quarterback on the roster. Put a pin in that, okay? So he does everything in his power to lead us to a victory against Philadelphia. Unfortunately, special teams gives us up a kickoff return for a touchdown. The defense was just awful in that game. And so it didn't matter how many points we scored. We weren't getting enough stops. We weren't doing the things we needed to do. You know, Kirk made a couple of mistakes in there too. He was not perfect, but he played his ass off. And he played well enough for us to win. You scored 30, whatever points we scored, 33, 34 points, whatever that total was for Washington. You scored that many, you should be able to win the football game. And unfortunately, we made too many mistakes in various areas, offense, defense, but primarily defense and special teams to win the game. Missed a field goal, gave up a kickoff return, as I mentioned. And so we lose 37 to 34, 36 to 33, something to that effect. And so you're 1-2. But Kirk played his ass off. So you're feeling good. You know, he played really well against Jacksonville, damn near flawless. He played his ass off, played his balls off against Philadelphia on the road. And so now you got the Giants' quick turnaround Thursday Night Football. Kirk's playing well. You're feeling really good. You're back home. And Kirk lays the stinkingest, fattest, nastiest egg you've ever seen. I mean, rotten. All right. Kirk is sacked. Kirk throws 3 or 4 picks. And this game was, I think this was the beginning of me just knowing that we can't stop anybody's tight end. You know, this made it official. This was the Larry Donnell game, for those of you who can recall. Larry Donnell killed us. And you're like, who the hell is Larry Donnell? I know. I know. You know, some bum tight end that nobody else had to worry about but us. He catches 3 touchdown passes, I think all of them in the first half. He killed us. Eli shredded us. And we didn't have Eli Manning problems back in those days. I think that was the game that started the real Eli Manning problems. You look at the record, and Eli killed us record-wise, but he wasn't big in those victories a lot of times. Eli shredded us in that game. They beat us up bad, man. We scored, 41 or 44 against Jacksonville. That same 44, 45, you know, whatever it was, the Giants put that on our head on Thursday night in our building on national television. It was embarrassing. We get our asses handed to us like 44 to 14 or something like that. So Griffin's still out from the fractured ankle. You got Colt McCoy on the roster as well, but they stick with Kirk one more game, even though that was a train wreck. And it was, I thought, the right decision. I was not a Colt McCoy fan, so I didn't want to see any parts of him. And so we go to Arizona, and there's a very winnable game in there, you know. And unfortunately, we didn't make enough plays, and Kirk, there were opportunities there for plays to be made, and Kirk just didn't make them, you know, late in that ball game. So that was a frustrating one there that you dropped. But as a matter of fact, I missed a game, Seattle, because Kirk was on the verge of getting benched, and then he played the Seattle Monday night game. And the only reason this game sticks out is because after the game was over, Brian Arakpo he made a loser comment. I just remember in the moment saying, what a bunch of losers we have, if that's your mentality. So Brian Arakpo after the game says, we just went toe-to-toe with the best team in the league. I feel good about the performance. I said, bro, we lost. And it doesn't matter that we went toe-to-toe. We lost. We're like 1-4. What are you talking about? Seattle, if you recall, it's 2014. They won the Super Bowl the year before. They would go back in 2014 that same year and lose because they didn't hand it to Marshawn Lynch at the 1, or they would have been back-to-back Super Bowl champions. But they destroyed Denver in 2013 in the Super Bowl. So they were the Super Bowl champion, defending Super Bowl champions. And they came to FedEx on a Monday night. And we hung in there, but I never felt like we were going to beat them. But we hung tough. But Russell Wilson was too much for us, and they beat us. And Arakpo makes that comment about hanging and going toe-to-toe with the best, like that's supposed to mean something. You want a juice box? Huh? You want a gold star for that? Huh? Like, what are you talking about, dude? You either win or you lose. So, that performance, though, Kirk was good in that game. It bought him another week against Arizona. And so we go on the road to Arizona. Solid performance again from Kirk, but he made some mistakes in that game. Missed some throws. And he threw a pick six at the end that made the score look a little bit more lopsided than what it really was. But I thought he played well enough for us to have a chance, but he didn't play well enough for us to win. He gave us a chance. He needed to play a little bit better, and we could have won that game. That game was there for the taking. So that was a disappointing loss in the desert. So we come back home, but that performance bought him another week. Griffin wasn't ready yet. And it has to be really bad for you to turn the keys over to Colt McCoy, because we know what he is already as a quarterback in the league by this time, you know. So you go home and Tennessee's awaiting you, and the Titans aren't very good. And so you got a golden opportunity to get you a win, something you haven't done since week 2, all right? And Kirk stinks it up in the first half, throws 2 picks. The Titans aren't running away with this game like they should, but Kirk is stinking it up. And so finally, Jay had seen enough. He inserts Colt McCoy. Colt throws one hitch to Pierre Garçon. He breaks a tackle and hightails it like 60 yards down the sidelines. And that's the game-winning score. We end up winning that game like 17-16, 18-16, 19-16, 19-17, something like that. So we squeaked by the Titans. And then we got Dallas on a Monday night the following week. We're not any good. Dallas is very good at this point. And so we are double-digit underdogs on a Monday night with Colt McCoy at quarterback, no less. We're supposed to be double-digit underdogs. And we go in there, and Colt McCoy at that time played the game of his life in the NFL. He took care of the football. He gave us a shot. Jordan Reed was masterful that night. But the thing that stuck out the most was Bashaud Breeland's defense against Dez Bryant. He locked his ass up. Lock him up! Lock him up! Locked his ass up and gave us a shot. And we took that game to overtime. Jordan Reed made a big catch in overtime. And we kicked the field goal to beat them. And it's one of those memorable games for me because I told my dad, we were watching the game together, I was like, man, take it easy on us, man. Take it easy on us. All right, look, we suck. Just don't embarrass us. This doesn't need to be 44-13, man. You know, this is Monday Night Football too. So they're like, yeah, come on, just spare us, all right? And so it felt so good to steal one when you have no business winning. So that's 2 in a row for, you know, even though he didn't start the Tennessee game, he finished it. That's 2 in a row for Colt McCoy. All of a sudden, you're 3-5. You know, you're not dead. And you hit a bye week. And now Griffin's ready to come back. And we're all like, hey, hold on a minute. I know this is supposed to be Operation, you know, Salvaging Griffin. But, hey, let's see where this Colt McCoy thing goes, right? Like, let's ride these wheels until they fall off. It might fall off quick. It's Colt McCoy, but let's just see where it goes. And Dan Snyder was like, hell no. Jay wanted to stick with Colt McCoy. Daniel Snyder said, Griffin's healthy, put him in the game. So hence we go to Minnesota and Griffin is back in. And I don't know what it is about Minnesota that lights up Robert Griffin III, but he always seems to play well against Minnesota. In his rookie season, it's, electrifying run and 38 points. We win. 2013 on a Thursday night, short week. He goes to Minnesota, puts up one of his best halves of football probably since the Dallas Cowboys rookie season, Thanksgiving, first half. And he's outstanding. And that's the thing that I'm clutching like, my last dollar, in terms of hope of it's still in there. He can do it. And now here we are again, Vikings in front of him, and he's doing it to me again. All right. He's wooing me all over again. He's sucking me back in. That performance, while it wasn't flawless, it was the best performance I had seen since the last time we saw Robert play Minnesota. And he played good in that game. But there were things that were apparent in that game. He had zero pocket presence. He was reluctant to run. And yes, I get it. It's his first game back from an ankle injury, so I understand not wanting to run. But he was reluctant to run. His pocket presence sucked. He didn't know when to vacate the pocket, when to extend the play. He took so many unnecessary hits. He took so many unnecessary sacks. He was holding on to the ball too long. But even with all that said, he made so many plays in that Vikings game, and he showed the downfield touch. He threw a beautiful deep ball. And so he showed that multiple times in that game with Deshaun Jackson. And I just thought, this iteration of Robert right here, you can win with this guy. And, he didn't make some of the plays down the stretch that would have helped us win the game, but the defense was just awful. Robert made a play. Robert threw an interception. We were up 10-0. We were dominating the Vikings. They were lifeless. Robert throws a bad interception, and that changed the whole game. And, we were always making household names out of garbage NFL players. We did it with Larry Donnell, and then we did it with Matt Asiata in that game. He had 3 touchdowns. I think he had a 2-point conversion as well. But with all that said, we had a shot, and Robert didn't get it done late. But even with that said, I was holding on to that Vikings game and saying, look, man, if I can get that out of you on a weekly basis, I like our chances. If we can't get that out of you, then I got to see what this Kirk Cousins fella is talking about. And if he can't get it done, then we got to move on, period. So after that, Robert, I thought he pretty much pronounced himself dead as an NFL starting quarterback, or at least in Washington, for that matter. The next 3 weeks were absolutely horrid. All right, so you start off with I think it was the 49ers the next week, and he just wasn't very good. He just wasn't good at all. Matter of fact, I think it was the Buccaneers game that was next. I remember Chris Cooley. This is when I was heavy into the, Chris Cooley film breakdown every single week. And I remember him very vividly saying, I can't evaluate the other players because Griffin's performance was so bad. Like, I can't evaluate the offensive line because he didn't have the proper, technique. 3-step drops, he's taking 5 steps. A 3-step drop, he's taking 1 step. Like, I can't evaluate the offensive line. He wasn't accurate enough with the football, so I can't evaluate the receivers. He only threw it like, I don't know, maybe 19, 20, 21 times. But he just wasn't good. He said, I can't evaluate this offense. Wow. Okay. So the Bucs game was it was a travesty. I mean, it was one of the worst games I'd watched Robert play. And I was watching this guy's confidence sink to a new low each and every single week. And so the next week we play I want to say that was the 49ers game, and he wasn't any good in that game either. And there was one more game in there, and he sucked ass in that game as well. And so it just got to a point where, like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? And you can see Jay getting frustrated. He didn't want to play this guy anymore. And so he finally made a decision to bench him. Yeah, and it's too late. Colt had his little moment in the sun, those 2 games that we won. Benching him cooled off any momentum he had. We were now 3-8. When Colt won those 2 games in a row, we were 3-5. So at least there was a chance. But now you're 3-8. The season's done. You bring Colt in. It's not any better. There aren't many games that stick out after that. There is one game in particular. That's the Rams game where Colt McCoy goes out. First of all, I talked about this on a previous episode of how petty Jeff Fisher was. Remember, he got the W against us when he was the head coach of I want to say it was the Titans then. It might have been with Vince Young where he puts up the big W. And so I don't know if there was a vendetta against us or what, but he sends out the 6 players that they got in the Robert Griffin III trade at the coin toss. Like, how petty can you be? I mean, that's as petty as it gets. And so they then promptly go out and kick our ass. Colt McCoy was absolutely horrendous. He looked like the Colt McCoy that everyone knew and loved from Cleveland, and why he was this close to being out of the league before we saved him here in Washington. And they were blanking us 24-0 late in the game. Bless the hearts of those who hung around long enough to chant the name RG3 in the crowd, to which Jay says, "Oh, you want RG3? You want him? We're getting our asses handed to us 24-0 with 2 minutes left in the game. You want him? Here he is." So if I'm Robert, I'm like, nah, I ain't going in. Let Kirk have it. I don't want that shit. And so they put him in with 2 minutes to go, and the Rams devour him, sack him, beat him up in the last 2 minutes of the game. And Jay says, "There you go. You wanted him? There he is." I said, "Jay, that was some petty shit right there." So this is when I was done with Robert, though. So it was after the Bucs game, the game where Chris Cooley says, I can't evaluate the offense because Griffin was so bad. And after that game and the presser, Robert said, "I need to play better, but everybody else around me needs to play better as well." And Jay Gruden lost his shit. And I did too, okay? I was already not the biggest Robert fan after the comments after the Eagles game last year, but now I had it. This was the final straw for me, okay? Because it was abundantly clear that this kid didn't take any personal responsibility for any of the struggles of this team or himself for that matter. He didn't see anything that he had done as wrong. Everything was Mike and Kyle Shanahan's fault. Everything is now Jay Gruden's fault. Everything's the offensive line's fault. Everything's the receiver's fault. It's the tight end's fault. It's the running back's fault. It's never his fault, right? He throws this little, "Oh yeah, I can be better, but everybody else around me needs to be better." No, we're not talking about everybody else. We're talking about you. You were ass today, okay? You were ass. And yes, everybody else around you could be better, but you weren't any better. You didn't uplift the team, okay? As the quarterback, it's your job to uplift the team. And you didn't do that. So Jay lays into him after that game. Jay kills him in the media, which I stood up. Bra effing O, Jay. That was the first time Jay earned brownie points with me. I stood up and gave that man an OV, right? So it didn't go over well with the media and, fans of Robert Griffin III. They were pissed. I loved it. Like, fillet his ass. He should be the last one talking about somebody's inadequate performance. And so Jay went off and was like, first of all, he needs to play better and he needs to worry about himself. Don't worry about anybody else's job. It's my job as the head coach to worry about everybody else's job. It's your job to worry about you, and you need to play better. And he said Robert was taking, 3 steps when he was supposed to be taking 1 step when he was supposed to be taking 3, 5 steps when he was supposed to be taking 3, on a 7-step drop, he's taking 5. The offensive line doesn't know where he's going to be because he's not getting the right depth. His footwork is all over the place. He needs to worry about himself. And it was like a wow moment. Like I was like, whew, oh my God. Even though I was excited and happy that somebody finally was stepping up and talking, I was like, damn, he ran over him, put that bitch in reverse, ran over him again, and then, ran over him one final time to make sure he was dead, and then took off. And so at that point, the relationship was severed. There wasn't anything there to salvage. Colt McCoy finishes up the season, gets injured. Kirk has to come back in late in the season. It's a mess, right? And so you go to 2015 thinking this isn't going to work. We finished the season 4-12 in Jay's first year, and there's a lot more questions than answers for this football team. The defense wasn't any good, so they fired Jim Haslett after that, season in 14, and you got to figure out a way to fix that. But more importantly, you got to find out, what do you have at quarterback? Like, this can't work if we don't have a QB. And this is why Jay Gruden was brought here, to fix the quarterback position. And if he can't do that, then we don't stand a chance. So 14 left us with more questions than answers. But this was supposed to be about salvaging Robert Griffin. And at this point, in my mind, he wasn't worth salvaging. He couldn't do it. And it was so disappointing because you're still in your mind, you haven't reconciled 2012 and where that went. Like, yeah, he got hurt, but where did that go? Where did that confidence, that bravado, where did the accuracy, where did the quick release? But you think about 2012 and and this is why I said people need to give Kyle and Mike credit. The reason Robert looked so good in that rookie season is because they schemed it up for him to look that good. They got him open targets so he didn't have to think. He didn't have to process the entire field. That first read, 9 times out of 10, was open. Okay? But here was the thing that was a little bit different. When things didn't work, when things broke down, he was confident in his abilities. He was confident in his legs. He was confident in making off-schedule throws and plays. He was dynamic. That all went away after he got injured for whatever reason. And I don't know if mentally he told himself, I got to be a pocket passer. I got to prove to them that I can throw from I don't know what happened and what changed in his mind, but he went from a guy that had this Houdini-like ability to escape the pocket and extend and make things happen, whether it was him running or him extending the play to be a passer. That had totally gone away, and he was a sitting duck in the pocket. He refused to run, it felt like. He was making poor decisions on read option. Instead of him giving it, he would keep it a lot of times, and teams were waiting on that. And you say, if he would have given that to Alfred Morris, if he would have given that to Roy Halou, that's 4 or 5 yards. Instead, he keeps it and ends up losing 2 or 3 yards. And so he just wasn't that guy anymore. Easy throws that are there. That Vikings game ended with an easy throw, and he dirts it like he's Donovan McNabb. And at that point, I said, yeah, okay, we got to move on from him. And it took an extra voice to come in to convince Dan, but I'm glad that extra voice existed, and we'll talk about that. I'll leave you right there as we head into 2015 and a season that, again, a lot of us won't forget because it was the last time Washington was a legit playoff team. So, we made it in 2020. I'm aware. This was the last time we were a legit playoff team. So, that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on The Reign of Terror, chronicling the 23 years of pure hell Daniel Snyder has put this fan base through. I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one.
LouieTeeNetwork.